Great. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very, very much for coming back, or for those of you who've joined us today for day 2 of the Youth Justice Convention. Yesterday was an absolutely great start, and I think that there's been some really interesting and buzzy conversations that the workshops and the speakers have left us with from yesterday. So thank you all very much for that. And also thank you to those who've given feedback on yesterday. We really do appreciate all of the feedback, because that will help us shape what we might want to think about for future years. I will just take this opportunity to thank 2 people at Youth Justice Board who actually put this all together, and that's Rowena Finnegan and Toby Mesa. And I think, they've done a sterling job in terms of making sure that this really does reflect what the sector wants, making sure that the speakers are relevant, and ensuring that what we're trying to tackle the issues with, we're actually getting some good feedback, evidence base and information, so that is very, very, very relevant for us going forward. So yesterday I left you all, those of you who were here, to say what were those impossible things that you were challenged with, and have we tried to start answering some of those things? And if we haven't, can we try and think about how we use today, collectively, collaboratively, together, to try and start to come up with some of those solutions to some of those impossible things? Today, we really are very lucky to be joined by some significant experts in the field. These areas are not only really topical about what's going on for young people today, but they are really genuinely complex and challenging for us all to say, what are we going to do? How do we deal with some of these issues? The particular issue for today, this morning, is around health and well-being. And we know that the issues of health and well-being of young people and adults in the criminal justice system is absolutely critical in terms of rehabilitation and being able to understand behaviour, how behaviour is impacted by things like trauma, but also empathy, and how do we work in certain ways to make sure that we understand the impact of that trauma, the psychological issues, and then what does our response look like? Because if we don't truly understand that, rehabilitation, reducing reoffending, all of those things are almost impossible. I personally have been a huge advocate of all of the kind of psychological treatments, the psychological understanding and approaches in criminal justice. And I personally have also seen that transformation in my youth offending service, both with young people but also with the staff. I think today also we are going to think much broadly around the contextual risks and how they play a role, and how we need to understand those contextual risks much better in terms of place shaping. So not always focusing on the young person, not always focusing on the victim or the perpetrator, but thinking about the context and the place, the physical space, and how can we, as a local authority and partners, really start to change some of those physical spaces to reduce the risks that are posed to our young people. Do we really understand? Do we have the knowledge? Do we understand from the young people's perspective what does that risk look like when they're living in our communities, the risks that they face, and how can we help to support them better? And this afternoon we've got some really key speakers to help us understand the online space. I think we are all a little afraid of what the online space means. We all use Google every day, I'm sure. We use emails. But that's very on the surface. And what are our young people using the online space for? And how do we become much more kind of confident about that? And how do we get upstream to understand the risks that young people are facing today? So before I start, I just wanted to share something with you, as I did yesterday. Today, I think my kind of views and visions around partnership working was the thing I felt I wanted to share. There's lots of banter, lots of conversation about how do you work better collaboratively in co-commissioning, how do you work in partnership, how do you transform, how do you integrate. These are all brilliant words, but what do they really mean? And I get quite frustrated because I think these words are put out there as if it's some new thing that we've never thought about and we've never done before. And actually, youth offending services are the pinnacle of partnership working and are the pinnacle of multi-agency working. And actually, it's something that we need to celebrate and hold on to much more. But I guess our challenge is really how do we move youth offending services, the kind of way in which we've worked, and all of the structures that we've put in place in our local areas, how do we push and influence a much wider sphere of partners and stakeholders? Because actually, that's where our benefit will come. So having worked for many years now, I started my career in youth offending, but my portfolio has grown to kind of crime reduction and public protection and safety. And what that has done is for me to see that actually there are much bigger jigsaw puzzles around us that we need to make sure youth offending sits within, that we stitch the right things together, that we understand where we can influence more, and how we get partners to really understand what does this mean for young people. Because I think the young people agenda is huge. It's something that people want to focus on. We all understand we have to get this right, but it often becomes too big an issue. And if we work together in other spaces, I think that we can get a much better outcome for our young people. So for me, I kind of just wanted to share a little bit today around making sure that we understand the synergies with other parts of the system, but also that we understand where those tectonic plates are. Where are the rubs? Where do we not see eye to eye? And really be upfront and brave to have those conversations with each other and to say, where can we make those things work? Where do those rubs, where can we not make that work? But actually, where can we be brave, honest, and open to have those conversations? And really, the kind of strapline for me this morning is to stomp with respect. Let's not lose everything that we've built. Let's not destroy the kind of foundations and the culture that we have. But I think going forward, we genuinely need to think about how we have some of those challenging conversations so that we're all thinking about the non-silo working and thinking about how we can work much more collaboratively together. So on that point, I'd now like to introduce our first keynote speaker of the morning. We're very, very lucky to have Professor Hugh Williams join us, who is an Associate Professor of Clinical Neuropsychology at the University of Exeter. Now, Hugh is going to lead a whole conversation in relation to the work that he has been doing on emotion processing in young offenders, the auditing of link worker services for young offenders with brain injury, and developing community-based interventions for people who are vulnerable and committing crime. So if I'd like to introduce Hugh to the stage, thank you very much.